Picture someone having such a fantastic imagination that they create an entire alternate reality. And that reality changes people the world over. This creation has evolved over time into something millions of people use as their escape from their everyday lives. Having those escapes, I've been told, are beneficial for mental health. This invention also created a new social bond in societies that many introverts felt welcome to embrace while they were struggling with more common social situations. Think inventing something like this is even possible, altering reality, benefiting mental health, developing social skills? Well, this legend did it. I'm going to enjoy talking about this legend today in this video. I've been following their results probably the majority of my life. I would confidently say my life in social groups would not be the same today without the existence of this creation. So if you are like me and love hearing something new and saying, "Oh yeah, I knew who that is. Wait, they did what? I didn't know that," then keep watching. You're never going to believe how this legend changed social creativity around the world with their discovery. Spoiler: welcome to Legend Origins, everyone. In this episode, Historian, who wanted to be an AI wizard for this one, and myself, will delve deep into story form, into the life of this incredibly impactful historical legend. Many of the legends we talk about on this channel, you'll never have heard of before. Me, being a bit of a nerd at heart, I totally knew who this was. But some facts surprised me on the background story. Comment below after watching if you knew what this legend did. I'd love to hear from you. But either way, if you did or didn't know, you'll definitely learn a few cool fun facts about this person and the massive impact they had on the planet and a large segment of society in many different cultures around the world. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Discovering new technologies, exploring new realms of possibility, or even committing outright horrible acts that we can never forget. Becoming a legend. And leaving a mark that will remain forever on our civilization, whether good or bad. Now, I'm going to introduce you to our legend of the day, but first, if you could harness your inner power and like, subscribe, and set notifications for this video. It's free for you to do so and costs nothing, but it helps this channel greatly, and it gets to spread more of this cool information to other people. All right, let's look at an origin story, shall we? To get to know this legend, I'm going to take you back to the 1940s in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, United States. It's a mellow autumn afternoon in Lake Geneva. Cool and crisp outside, but no snow yet. The sound of children laughing and jumping into piles of leaves fills your ears. But a young boy named Ernest is not one of those kids. Ernest, a skinny boy of 8 at the time, has been lying in bed for a couple months now, with a bout of near-fatal pneumonia. While the other kids played and had fun, Ernest, being a little on the sickly side, stared out the window at the children playing. But he didn't let that get to him, not being able to participate and all. Instead, he spent his time devouring books in his hospital bed, and also later in his bed at home. It was safe to say Ernest was bookish in looks and action. He loved fantasy and adventure novels like John Carter of Mars or Robert Howard's Conan the Barbarian, even H.P. Lovecraft's cosmic horrors. He loved lost civilizations, fantasy, knights, wizards, soldiers at war, and wandering heroes that existed uniquely in Ernest's own mind. These months in bed created a passion for what was to come in young Ernest. In Ernest's earlier teens, he obsessed over making his own small games on paper and drawing maps of fictional worlds that only existed in his mind. He was a very creative kid. In his later teens, this obsession migrated to playing war games replicating historical American battles with a group called the International Federation of War Games. Basically a bunch of people who enjoyed playing battles with miniature army figurines on a hex map, trying to win the day for their side. Ernest was also a tournament-level chess player and started going by his middle name in his teens, Gary. He wasn't a fan of the name Ernest. The International Federation of Wargamers was founded in 1966 by Gary and a small group of serious wargaming enthusiasts. It was dedicated to traditional wargaming. You know, the kind of games where you move miniature armies on a tabletop using complex rules to simulate historical battles, such as the Napoleonic, the American Civil War, and the World Wars. You get the drift. Geeks. No, just kidding. But, you know, some of the youth in that genre may take the title geek as a badge of pride. When I was reviewing this small group of locals, I actually asked myself, why international in the name? I personally thought they were thinking of Star Trek's United Federation of Planets at the same time and used something similar, to sound like they're bigger than they actually were. Anyways, that's just my guess. I don't know for sure. In his later teens, Gary dropped out of school, probably distracted by all his game playing. Into his mid-20s, he worked odd jobs here and there until he landed a soul-crushing career as an insurance underwriter. No offense to the insurance people out there, those were Gary's words, not mine. The job he had paid the bills, but Gary spent every spare moment he had in his basement running elaborate medieval war games, using new rules he had just created in a system he called Chainmail. This was not your ordinary toy soldier games like his war group played. This system included magic, monsters, and heroes with specific skills. As a player, you didn't just move pieces across a board. You played your pieces like they had purpose and individuality. In 1969, Gen Con had its second gathering of gaming enthusiasts, players, and admirers. This was a convention that Gary helped co-found. It featured hundreds of vendors showing tabletop games, board games, miniatures, card games, and the list goes on and on. Gen Con is actually still running today and going strong, and it's arguably the largest gaming convention currently in the world. Okay, back to Gen Con 2 though. Gary, while attending there, met a brilliant, soft-spoken college kid from Minnesota named David. David had been running a naval war game he had created himself called Don't Give Up the Ship. David had told Gary that he had also recently been working on a game that was wilder than anything anyone had ever imagined. It was a fantasy campaign style game called Blackmore. In Blackmore, players use tabletop miniatures to explore dungeons, fight monsters, and most inspired, roleplay as the characters. These characters could do anything in the game a real person could do. Talk, lie, bribe, betray, protect, feel honor, anything. Gary got hooked immediately. The two men, Gary and David, started corresponding and collaborating together. David sent Gary his Blackmore rulebook and campaign notes. Gary then took those rules and incorporated them into his own combat system, Chainmail, and expanded the scope massively. With David's concept of role-playing and Gary's detailed system of fantasy fighting and processes, Dungeons & Dragons was born in 1973. It was a 150-page manuscript typed up by both of them manually. On a lovely summer's day, January 1974, Gary and David printed 1,000 copies of their new game, Dungeons & Dragons, put them all in a plain brown cardboard box, and formed a tiny little company called Tactical Studies Rules, TSR for short, all done out of Gary's basement. They priced the first stapled copy of their game at $10 a pop, hoping to sell a few hundred copies to their wargaming friends and acquaintances. Within a month, they'd sold out. By the end of that year, they were reprinting constantly. They were selling so many copies. By 1976, just 2 years later, they'd sold over 50,000 copies, and their new game was exploding into college dorms, high schools, and military bases. Everyone loved this game. Gary was actually able to quit his job in insurance, and he moved TSR into an old hotel in Lake Geneva and became the public face of the game. Gary was definitely the more sociable and outspoken partner between the two of them. With the rapid expansion of the gaming world seemed to change overnight. Dungeons & Dragons created an entirely new form of entertainment, the tabletop role-playing game. Before 1974, games had winners and losers. D&D had stories, quests, and campaigns. Players didn't just roll dice and move figurines on a map. They created characters with backstories, dreams, fears, desires. Their new game spread like wildfire because it gave the ordinary person out there the power to become a hero or a villain or anything in between. It actually birthed the entire fantasy gaming industry that we know today. They created new monsters like beholders, mind flayers, umber hulks, and displacer beasts. The one that made an appearance in the D&D movie was pretty cool. Some of their creatures were thanks to other fantasy giants like Tolkien, who came up with Ents, which the boys changed into tree Ents. Tolkien also came up with elves, dwarves, orcs, and the dreaded Balrog.
You cannot pass!
Everyone remembers that scene from Lord of the Rings. Plus, there was a big mix of mythological creatures from the past added to Dungeons & Dragons as well, like dragons. Some good, some evil. Most of the time you could tell their alignment from their color. Also, fairies from the Fey realm, causing all sorts of mischief. And wraiths, or major bad time malevolent spirits, and many, many more creatures. Today, the fantasy industry worldwide takes in about $65 billion, and D&D sparked many fantasy spin-offs, like video games such as World of Warcraft, Baldur's Gate, and Elden Ring, plus LARPing, which stands for live action role-playing for people who didn't know. Basically, dress-up fantasy games for adults. There are also groups like Critical Role, where players are pretty much like minor celebrities, and people come to watch them play in auditoriums and online. Heck, even the TV show Stranger Things proudly gives a big nod to the creation of this game, as their main characters play D&D in their parents' basement. When I was a kid, I was literally one of the Stranger Things kids, hiding out in my buddy's basement playing games. Many of those friendships I developed through gaming, I've kept my whole life, and they've been some of my closest companions. Every time someone says something like, "I cast magic missile," you're speaking Gary and David's created language. Many of the pictures and illustrations in the 1974 original box set were done by Greg Bell and Dave Sutherland. Because Gary and David couldn't afford to hire big-time artists yet, the art was rough and kind of basic compared to what comes later. But let me make a point. I'm not knocking Greg and Dave. They were the OGs of D&D art. They just weren't professional artists, but they still have my respect. When TSR started making real money in 1978, they were able to hire some more talented artists like Trapier and Otis and other full-timers, which dramatically improved the visual quality of the game. This is a really important point, because this game is all about your imagination. And imagination has a starting point and grows from that. The better the images, the more vivid the starting point. The game also utilized polyhedral dice, D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, D20. Fun fact, these dice weren't originally meant for this game. They were adapted by David and Gary from educational math games and earlier hobby war games, primarily sourced from creative publications in the early 70s. But these platonic solid shapes have existed pretty much since antiquity. The 20-sided die actually appeared way back in Roman times. Now, Gary and David, their business was growing by leaps and bounds, and they were making money, lots of it. The art was great, people loved it. What could possibly go wrong? Infighting.
See, dude, you already know. You're letting the trash sit on the doormat, dude. A doormat?
TSR grew from a small basement operation to a multi-million-dollar company almost overnight. Gary was brilliant at rules and world building, but reportedly not so good at business. And he was the full-timer in the relationship. The infighting timeline kind of went like this. 1972 to 1974, David created Blackmore and shares it with Gary, who merges it into Chainmail and expands the scope. They published their first box set, and it is a hit. 1975 to 1979, D&D explodes in popularity. Gary and TSR make most of the money, and Gary gets all the credit. David, the silent co-creator, is feeling increasingly sidelined and underappreciated. According to people that knew Gary, he was reported to be a little on the arrogant side and also a controlling micromanager, which isn't surprising. Many people who create games are very focused and single-minded. Well, back to the timeline. 1979 to 1981. David sues TSR and Gary for royalties and the proper credit he feels he deserves. I personally side with David on this one. He was the co-creator, and I saw their contributions really as 50-50. 1981, the partners reach a settlement, and David gets some royalties on the original D&D rules and is listed as co-creator, which he wasn't up until that point. This whole thing led to a permanently damaged relationship between the two, unfortunately. They had some big-time troubles in the 80s as well, with what they call the Satanic Panic era for Dungeons & Dragons. There was a larger cultural panic during this time when some loud voices, like Patricia Pullings, who claimed her son had committed suicide due to a campaign he was playing in Dungeons & Dragons. Patricia formed an organization called BADD, Bothered About Dungeons & Dragons. Her organization quickly grew. They appeared on national television shows and claimed the game taught children how to cast real spells and summon actual demons. Here's a quick clip.
You have eyewitnesses. For instance, one case, the parents saw their child summon Dungeons and Dragons demons into his room before he killed himself. Another case, the kid thought he had the ability to astral travel, coming from the Dungeons and Dragons game, that he could leave his body and come back. And he had rigged it up just according to the rule book so he could do it. He was surrounded by his materials and put a bullet in his head so he could leave his body, and he's never come back.
This is make-believe, and nobody's murdered, and there's no violence there. I mean, to use an analogy with another game, who is bankrupted by losing a game of Monopoly? Nobody is, because the money is make-believe, the property is make-believe.
Now, we all know this is silly, but people believed it. There were also many religious organizations that said the game was satanic and should be avoided at all costs. This propaganda spread throughout Sunday schools all over North America. This not only hurt role-playing sales, but it also hurt their image. You know, when you think about it, there's a real reason many kids were relegated to playing D&D while hiding in their basements. Because of people like Patricia, there was now a real social stigma related to role-playing. You were a geek, a nerd, or an outcast. Just look at how the kids on Stranger Things were viewed. Not far from the real truth. Now let's pause for a second. If a game like D&D could actually allow you to summon demons, wouldn't that be some crazy scientific breakthrough? I'd love to see someone go on Oprah, summon a demon to show the world, or maybe cast a fireball and blow up that pesky stump you can't get out of your front lawn. But of course, everything in the game is imaginary. That's not to say mental illness isn't real, and some people can be influenced. But those cases of people will also be influenced by movies, stories, even video games. Also, proper treatment is the answer, not banning everything. Okay, back to the story. A little known fact about Gary is that during this whole time, he was a practicing Jehovah's Witness. The contrast between the dude that created Beholders and Mind Flayers and someone knocking on your door talking about the Watchtower magazine is a pretty massive gap. Anyways, back to the early 80s. TSR did branch off a little from the games in 1983 to 1985. They actually made a deal with Marvel Productions to make Dungeons & Dragons: The Animated Series, where they made 27 TV episodes. Here's a clip of that show, just in case you don't remember it.
I don't like this!
Whoa! What's happening?
Whoa! Where are we?
Look out!
Fear not, Ranger. Barbarian, magician, thief, cavalier, and acrobat.
Who was that?
That was Venger, the force of evil. I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
As a kid, I thought it was really cool. For TSR to keep growing, they were selling shares in the company. The Bloom brothers, Brian and Kevin, over time, were actually able to buy up 60% of the company. Again, Gary, not the best business guy. Gary and the Blooms had differing visions of the future. Gary wanted the company to keep growing into creative aspects of gaming, like new games and novels, and a world-building campaign he was making called Dangerous Journeys, Well, the Bloom brothers were coming at it from a different angle. They wanted to run TSR like a normal business, focusing on maximizing profits, minimizing costs, and expanding into areas like toys, clothing, and licensing deals. In 1985, the Blooms voted to remove Gary as president of the company. They stripped him of his operational power and gave him a much smaller role in the company. Gary was quoted by saying, "I was stabbed in the back by the people who I thought were my friends." David, the co-creator, was still part of the company at this time, as a quiet partner. Believe it or not, he had an even poorer relationship with the Bloom brothers. He thought they were even worse than Gary for hogging the credit or paying out fair royalties. David didn't work for TSR under any capacity, but he kept his ownership right till the end. Smart guy. In the mid-90s, the Blooms had almost bankrupted TSR, and they eventually sold everything to a company called Wizards of the Coast in 1997. It's a little sad the business went down the tubes like that, but sometimes that's business. A little later on, in May 2000, in a Futurama episode, Gary made a cameo appearance there. He came to help the crew through a problem. He then gave them some old-school D&D advice involving rolling dice and checking tables. Here's a quick clip from that episode.
To my left, you'll recognize Gary Gygax, inventor of Dungeons & Dragons.
Greetings. It's a pleasure to meet you.
This was one of the very few appearances Gary makes after he's left TSR. He seems to have enjoyed getting in his little reference to him being a creator in Dungeons & Dragons. In his later years, Gary mellowed somewhat. He moved back to Lake Geneva and ran a small games convention there. He also made some side income mentoring young game designers, helping them be their creative inspiration. He never regained the fortune or control he once had in TSR, but he remained proud of what he had started with David. On a chilly March morning, Gary died at the age of 69 from complications of an abdominal aneurysm. The gaming world mourned the passing of this legend, and the conventions worldwide held a moment of silence for Gary. Thousands of gamers rolled dice in his honor. It was quite sad. Now, let's give some pause and reflect on today. If you play D&D, or many of the games that sprouted through the inspiration of that gaming system, if you watch Critical Role on TV, or lose yourself in a game of Baldur's Gate 3, remember that you are staring into a world that began in a sick boy's bedroom, forced to imagine his way to a better reality. In the 1940s in Wisconsin, that world exploded from a small basement in Lake Geneva in 1974, so you could enjoy fantasy games. In my opinion, it was the equal partnership and imagination of both Gary and David that made this industry come into existence. So, our legend for the day, Ernie Gary Gygax. He didn't just invent a game, he invented a new way for humans to come together and tell stories, create their own realities, develop their own personalities, and complete their own quests, vanquishing their own dragons, one die roll at a time. So, tell me in the comments below, had you ever heard of Ernest Gary Gygax, the man that co-created Dungeons & Dragons, and also co-founded Gen Con? I may add, that's no small feat. You see, you never know where the next great idea will come from. Maybe it'll be you, the listener, inspired by Gary's fated meeting and partnership with David Arneson that changed the way games are played in our world forever. Thank you for watching my video. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you've learned something new about one of the legends that changed our world. If you did enjoy this, please like and subscribe, as I will be releasing more legends to come. I would also like to hear any suggestions you might have of legends to do in the future. Someone who did extraordinary things, but sits in relative obscurity for the most part. They're the fun ones. Remember, out there somewhere, hidden in forgotten textbooks or manuscripts, unwatched movie clips, or even in the memories of our seniors, are legends. And they changed your life, whether you knew it or not.